After spending the first season of the Owl House as a comic relief character, King has had quite the emotional journey and character growth in Season 2 already, uncovering his true origins, adopting the last name Clawthorn, and developing new powers, all the while in search for his father, who may or may not be the individual who witnessed King's broadcast at the end of Ida's Requiem, and brought a letter to the Owl House at the end of Knock Knock Knockin' on Hootie's door, only for it to be carelessly devoured by Hootie. But it's okay, Hootie's still the MVP! All of this being said, King's arc throughout this season may be one that ends in tragedy, because there's a strong chance that soon, Belos may have his eyes set on King's head, or should I say, his lungs. Recently, many dots have been connected to King and the list of ingredients for the mysterious Grimwalker, as documented in Eclipse Lake. So today, let's lay all the clues out on the table and answer the questions. Is King a Stonesleeper? And if so, why would this revelation set King up for immediate danger? But before we dive in, please be sure to subscribe to the Roundtable and enable notifications if you want to stay in the loop of all our Owl House content during the break. Let's start with those Grimwalker ingredients, which, as you may already know from our breakdown of Eclipse Lake, is mostly comprised of things we've seen all throughout Season 2. The Galder Stones from Through the Looking Glass Ruins, Palistrum Wood from Hunting Palisman, which Luce is currently in possession of, Silky Damas Scales, Silky Damases being introduced in separate tides, and two ingredients we don't recognize are the Stonesleeper Lungs and the Bone of Ortet. So, where does the idea that King is a Stonesleeper come from in this? Well, let's take a look at the depiction of the Stonesleeper itself. The shape of its head and its horns do bear resemblance to King, although the additional spikes on its back aren't present on either King or his implied father. Though, we could chalk this up to that potentially not being a feature on every Stonesleeper, and King could still grow into them in the future. And with a name like Stonesleeper, King's Kubone-like appearance starts to make a bit more sense, alongside the subservient creatures like John Luke, who appear to be made of stone. And as for the sleeper part, King is extremely partial to napping. Think of how many instances in the show there are where King ends up falling asleep, working in some good shut-eye. Not to mention when he does fall asleep, he goes limp. It's often perceived as laziness, but I think it could actually just be a part of his nature as a Stonesleeper. I wouldn't be surprised if the constant napping goes a little bit deeper in terms of being a necessity for the biology of his species, but I'll hold off on that for now. What seals the deal for me is the fact that the creation of a Grimwalker requires the lungs of a Stonesleeper out of any other organ or using any other creature on the Boiling Isles. I don't believe this is a coincidence, given that King has just awakened his powers, which, wouldn't you know it, is the ability to create powerful shockwaves from his screams. Presumably, if you remove his lungs, I doubt he'd survive, and the ability goes bye-bye. For those who suspect Hunter may be a Grimwalker himself, I do think it's also worth pointing out that King's shockwaves share a similar color scheme to Hunter's Palisman magic. May be related, may not be, it's just worth throwing out there. Screaming has always been a trait of King's, initially used as a gag, so having this build up into something major would be a really great payoff, and recontextualizing older episodes on a rewatch, which is something I prefer shows do anyway. Load me up on that foreshadowing greatness and amp up the replay value. I do think it's also telling that Knock Knock Knockin' on Hootie's door implied that King's species existed before the Titan was slain, as we know Belos covered up the existence of the Island King was hatched on in Echoes of the Past. He wants to cover up their existence, but knows he would one day need them, which could be the reason why he allowed King and his father to live this long in the first place. Laying all this out on the table, the likelihood of King being a Stonesleeper has an inevitable conclusion. He'll be hunted down by the Emperor's Coven sooner than later. Hunter will probably be the one assigned to carry out the slaying, but I could also see him clashing with Kikimora on this once more, to the benefit of King. Alternatively, the idea of Kikimora and King facing off against one another, given that they're sort of foils, would be entertaining to see in its own right. But if King doesn't work out, we now know there's another Stonesleeper around for Belos to rob of his lungs and life. King's dad. Well, presumed dad, but for the sake of drama, I'll just refer to him as King's dad from here on out. The Owl House has definitely been ramping up the emotions as the season progresses, and while I would love for King to reunite with his father, I think that would only be a temporary change in status quo. I don't buy for a second that they would kill off King, but they would off someone close to him, someone he values. Finding his dad has been his top priority, and I really want King to get the answers to questions that have been plaguing his mind. But when it comes down to it, much like how Rain sacrificed themselves for Ida's escape, I think King's father would do the same for his son. When the time comes for the Emperor's Coven to make their move on King, his father may cut their time together short and offer himself up in exchange for King's survival, something that King would try to oppose, but fail to change the outcome of, granting Belos the Stonesleeper Lungs, and leaving King heartbroken with a loss that will feel impossible to overcome. And yeah, we're just gonna kinda end on that dark note. As always, I wanna know what you guys think. Do you believe King could be a Stonesleeper? And if so, how do you think this will factor into the overarching story and the possible creation of a new Grimwalker? Let us know in the comments below. And you can keep the conversation going over at Roundtable Vids on Twitter and Instagram, and you can find me over at OffStripVox on both platforms. Give me a follow, embrace the shitpost. If you enjoyed this video, please sort of like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great cartoon content. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. See ya!